Think of the most terrifying player in NBA history, a man so ruthlessly dominant, the league literally had to rewrite its rulebook just to survive him. Prime Shaquille O'Neal wasn't just a basketball player, he was a 300-pound force of nature. But there is a massive, glaring contradiction at the center of his legacy. What if I told you the most unstoppable man on the planet had a fatal flaw? A flaw so severe, opposing coaches built their entire defensive game plans around humiliating him. He couldn't shoot, not even a little. Across 19 grueling seasons, Shaq made exactly one three-pointer. He missed over 5,000 free throws. It was a weakness that birthed the biggest what-if debates in basketball history. What if Shaq actually made his free throws? What if he possessed a jump shot? It was this exact flaw, and his frustrating refusal to fix it, that sparked the most explosive, tragic rivalry in sports history with Kobe Bryant. But to understand why Shaq played with such devastating force, and why he couldn't overcome that one glaring weakness, you have to look past the shattered backboards and the 4 NBA championships. Before he was Superman, he was a deeply insecure, oversized kid from Newark, bullied for his size. Abandoned by his biological father, he was a boy drifting toward the dangerous streets of New Jersey, paralyzed by self-doubt. Then, the unthinkable happened. A strict military drill sergeant entered his life. He wasn't just a stepfather, he was the father who stepped up. In a heartbeat, everything changed. Sergeant Philip Harrison looked at this broken, giant boy, nicknamed the Little Warrior, and made him a promise that would shake the foundation of the NBA. This is the story of how a kid paralyzed by his own weaknesses conquered the basketball world, and the heavy price he paid to do it. To the world, he is an indestructible giant. But in 1972, in the gritty projects of Newark, New Jersey, Lucille O'Neal looked at her newborn baby and gave him a name that carried a very different weight: Shaquille Rashan. In Arabic, it translates to one thing: Little Warrior. And he was going to need every ounce of that warrior spirit just to survive. Growing up, Shaq was a freak of nature, but not in the way that gets you drafted #1 overall. By the time he was a preteen, he was already nearly double the size of the kids in his class. He didn't look like a future athlete, he looked like a complete outcast. He couldn't fit into normal clothes, he couldn't fit into normal desks, and he certainly couldn't fit in with his peers. The relentless bullying birthed a deep, crippling insecurity. But there was one problem. The one person who was supposed to teach a young boy how to navigate a cruel world, his biological father, was nowhere to be found. He wanted absolutely nothing to do with him. Shaq was a giant boy with no anchor, surrounded by the violent, crime-ridden streets of Newark. He was practically destined to become just another forgotten casualty of the neighborhood. In a heartbeat, everything changed. Lucille met a man named Philip Harrison. He was a strict, no-nonsense military drill sergeant. And when he looked at Shaquille, he didn't see an awkward, oversized burden. He saw a son. Sergeant Harrison didn't just become his stepfather. He became his ultimate protector and the emotional pillar of his entire life. He instilled a ruthless, military-style discipline into the boy. But more importantly, he gave him a vision. For Christmas, Harrison handed Shaq a pair of tickets to Madison Square Garden, the New York Knicks versus the Philadelphia 76ers. Sitting in those stands, the young Little Warrior watched Julius Erving, the legendary Dr. J, fly through the air. The thunderous roar of the arena shook Shaq to his core. It ignited a fiery obsession inside him that would never be extinguished. He turned to Sergeant Harrison and said the words that would eventually rewrite the NBA rulebook: "I want to become an NBA player." Harrison didn't laugh. He didn't tell him to be realistic. Instead, the drill sergeant looked the insecure giant in the eyes and made an impossible vow: "I will make you the best big man of all time." And this was only the beginning. To protect Shaq from the deadly streets of New Jersey, Harrison completely uprooted the family in 1982, moving them thousands of miles away to a strict U.S. Army base in Germany. Shaq was devastated. He was stripped of his friends, his home, and everything he knew. No one could have anticipated what came next, because on that isolated military base in Europe, a chance encounter was about to turn this shy, uncoordinated teenager into an absolute monster. Life in Germany was rough. Shaq was enormous, but he was far from a basketball prodigy. In fact, as a freshman, he couldn't even make the military base's basketball team. He was cut. He felt like a failure. Then, the unthinkable happened. Louisiana State University head coach Dale Brown arrived on base to run a basketball clinic. Sergeant Harrison, refusing to let his son quit, dragged his heartbroken boy to the post-camp talk. Shaq timidly walked up to the college coach and asked a simple question: how do I jump higher? Coach Brown looked at the towering giant and assumed he was a fully grown enlisted soldier. When Shaq revealed he was only 13 years old, the room froze in utter disbelief. Brown's eyes lit up. He knew immediately he had to recruit this kid. Brown obsessively mailed Shaq letters every single week. He sent VHS tapes of dominant big men to study and grueling strength programs to build his vertical leap. But there was one problem. Despite his insane size and the college-level workouts, Shaq still couldn't dunk. He was trying to be flashy. He was trying to finesse the game like his idol, Dr. J. By his junior year, the military relocated the family again, this time to San Antonio, Texas. Shaq finally made the varsity team at Cole High School. He was putting up numbers, but he was playing soft. He wasn't fulfilling his terrifying potential. During a regular season game, Shaq drove hard to the basket and blew a simple, wide-open layup. Suddenly, all hell broke loose. Sergeant Harrison stormed straight onto the court mid-game. He literally forced his son to call a timeout, dragged him outside the gym, and got right in his face. "Stop trying to be Dr. J," Harrison barked. "Be Shaquille O'Neal." Something snapped inside the teenager's brain. He walked back onto the hardwood, radiating pure anger. He caught the ball and slammed it with such violent force that opposing players literally scrambled out of his way. From that exact moment, Shaquille O'Neal didn't just want to score. He wanted to break the rim. He wanted to humiliate whoever stood in his way. He wanted his opponents to fear him. But just as the monster was unleashed, his fatal flaw reared its ugly head. Cole High School marched all the way to the regional final. Late in a tied game, the entire season came down to Shaq standing at the free throw line. He missed both. His team was eliminated. The young giant was crushed. He vowed to never let his team down like that ever again. The very next season, fueled by pure vengeance, he led his team to a perfect 36-0 record. In the state championship, he didn't just dominate on offense, he completely suffocated the opposing team with block after block. He had conquered Texas, fulfilling the promise he made after choking at the line a year prior. But the real test was waiting for him in the NCAA. Shaq's loyalty to Coach Brown ran so deep that he committed to LSU long before he even blossomed into a national sensation. But when he arrived on campus, the young phenom ran into a massive roadblock. LSU already had a stacked roster featuring two absolute stars, Stanley Roberts and a lightning-quick guard named Chris Jackson. The most dominant high school player in Texas was suddenly relegated to being a third option off the bench. Before anyone could react, the entire landscape shifted. Stanley Roberts was ruled academically ineligible, leaving a massive void in the middle. Shaq didn't just step into the starting role, he completely hijacked the college basketball world. Over his next 2 seasons, he transformed into a terrifying spectacle, averaging nearly 26 points, over 14 rebounds, and swatting away over 5 shots a game. He was quickly crowned the National Player of the Year, but there was one problem. His fatal flaw had finally been exposed on national television. College teams realized that trying to stop Shaq at the rim was a suicide mission, so they created a cheat code. If he got the ball, just foul him. The strategy was brutally effective. Shaq was shooting a miserable 57% from the charity stripe. Because of this single, glaring weakness, LSU never made it past the second round of the March Madness tournament. He lay awake at night, consumed by doubt. He convinced himself he wasn't good enough for the NBA, comparing himself to Duke's polished star, Christian Laettner, who had a flawless jump shot and a tight handle. But the NBA didn't care about his free throws. They were salivating over his sheer, unadulterated power. In 1992, the Orlando Magic won the draft lottery and immediately selected the LSU Giant first overall.
The first pick in the 1992 NBA draft, the Orlando Magic selects Shaquille O'Neal.
Shaq's impact was instantaneous. He bullied grown men, averaging an absurd 25.8 points, 16.4 rebounds, and 3.4 blocks in his first 5 games. He became the first rookie in NBA history to be named Player of the Week in his very first week. Yet, the ghost of his free throw shooting haunted him. Late in his rookie year, fighting for a playoff spot, the Phoenix Suns purposefully hacked him in a tight, crucial game. He bricked from the line. Orlando ultimately missed the playoffs by a razor-thin margin. Shaq needed help.
But he has a weakness. He's missed 23 of his last 37 free throws.
And he found it in the most unlikely of places. Shaq landed a role in the Hollywood basketball movie Blue Chips. On set, he started playing pickup games with a lanky, lightning-fast guard named Anthony "Penny" Hardaway. The chemistry was immediate, electric. Shaq marched straight into the Orlando front office and made a demand: draft Penny. Through an absolute miracle of lottery luck and a blockbuster draft day trade, the Magic paired Shaq with Penny Hardaway. The NBA had its newest, most exciting dynamic duo. In his sophomore season, Shaq went nuclear. He recorded one of the most insane stat lines in history: 24 points, 28 rebounds, and 15 blocks in a single game. 15 blocks! He dragged Orlando to 50 wins and their first ever playoff appearance. But the postseason is an unforgiving place. In the first round, matched up against Reggie Miller's gritty Indiana Pacers, Shaq missed a crucial late-game rebound and choked at the free throw line. The Magic were swept out of the building. He was humiliated. Then, the unthinkable happened. The Magic retooled, added champion veteran Horace Grant, and marched into the 1995 playoffs looking for blood. They obliterated the Celtics and set up a second-round collision with the Chicago Bulls, featuring a freshly unretired Michael Jordan. Bulls head coach Phil Jackson thought he had the perfect game plan. He ordered his players to relentlessly hack Shaq, betting that the Giant would crumble under the playoff pressure at the free throw line. No one could have anticipated what came next. The strategy completely backfired. Shaq stepped to the line and nailed 12 of his 16 attempts. He physically dismantled the Bulls, and after a grueling, revenge-fueled 7-game series against the Indiana Pacers, the young Giant had done the impossible. In just his third season, Shaquille O'Neal was heading to the NBA Finals. The stage was set. Orlando was in the finals, brimming with youthful arrogance, but they were about to run into one of the greatest big men to ever touch a basketball: Hakeem the Dream Olajuwon. The Magic held a 20-point lead in Game 1. It looked like a coronation, but Hakeem wasn't going to let that happen. Everything spiraled in an instant. The game came down to the wire, and Nick Anderson, usually a rock, missed 4 consecutive free throws. Houston stole the game in overtime, and the momentum shattered the Magic entirely. The Rockets swept them, 4-0. Years later, Shaq would admit he made a fatal error. He gave his idol Hakeem way too much respect instead of playing to destroy him. The little warrior had learned a brutal lesson. Before you can succeed, you must learn how to fail. But the worst was yet to come. The following season, the cracks in the Orlando foundation became canyons. Penny Hardaway signed a massive max contract and demanded to be the highest-paid player on the team. Then, Shaq broke his thumb in an exhibition game, forcing him to miss the first 2 months of the season. And then, tragedy struck. Shaq's grandmother, Odessa Chambliss, the woman who raised him into the man he was, passed away. Devastated, Shaq took time away from the team to grieve. But there was one problem. When Orlando was set to face Michael Jordan and the Bulls that week, head coach Brian Hill publicly threw Shaq under the bus, telling the media he had no idea where his star player was. A grieving Shaq hopped on a flight, arrived in the second quarter, and dropped 21 points. But the damage was done. The trust between the player and the coach was incinerated. The final blow came in contract negotiations. Orlando, hesitant to pay Shaq what he was worth, offered him a deal that was less than what Penny was making. To add insult to injury, a local newspaper ran a poll asking if Shaq was worth the $15 million he was asking for. 91.3% of the public said no. In a heartbeat, everything changed. On July 12, 1996, Shaquille O'Neal packed his bags and left for the Los Angeles Lakers, signing a massive $120 million deal. He arrived in LA ready to build a dynasty with a young, electric shooting guard named Kobe Bryant. But the Lakers were a powder keg. For 3 straight seasons, they were decimated in the playoffs, failing to reach the mountaintop. And a massive part of that friction came from who Shaq was becoming off the court. Shaq wasn't just an athlete anymore. He was a walking pop culture earthquake.
Please have an autograph, please.
In 1993, while other players were strictly resting in the offseason, Shaq was in a recording studio. He released a rap album, Shaq Diesel. Critics rolled their eyes. Basketball purists hated it. But then, the album went platinum. He was a platinum-selling rapper. He was starring in Hollywood movies like Kazam and Steel. He was everywhere, radiating a hilariously magnetic, unfiltered personality that made him a global icon. He was building a brand before basketball players even knew what a brand was. But this exact lifestyle is what fractured the Batman and Robin dynamic. Kobe Bryant, an obsessive, psychopathic worker, resented Shaq's laid-back approach to conditioning. He hated Shaq's countless side quests in the entertainment industry. And most of all, he hated Shaq's flat-out refusal to fix his free throw shooting. Shaq, in turn, felt completely disrespected by the young gun who refused to pass the ball. The media tore them apart. The fans questioned if Shaq would ever win a title, or if he was just another Hollywood celebrity playing basketball in his spare time. The team was broken. The tension was suffocating. The Lakers needed a miracle to stop the implosion, and on the horizon, the greatest coach in NBA history was waiting to walk through their door. Phil Jackson, the mastermind who had guided Michael Jordan to 6 rings, walked into the Lakers' locker room with a singular vision: to dismantle the power struggle. He had to make the offense flow through the one man who couldn't be stopped. Shaq was the focal point. Everything else was secondary. The results were immediate and terrifying. The 2000 Lakers went nuclear, racking up 67 wins and 15 losses. Shaq played like a man possessed, averaging nearly 30 points, 14 rebounds, and 3 blocks a game, earning his first and only regular season MVP award. But in the Western Conference Finals against the Portland Trail Blazers, the ghosts of his past returned. Down 15 points in Game 7, with their season on the brink of collapse, Portland went back to the strategy that had haunted him for years: the Hack-a-Shaq. It was a nightmare of free throw anxiety. The Lakers' entire championship hope hinged on him hitting his shots. Yet, for the first time, he didn't blink. He clawed the team back, won the game, and went on to crush the Indiana Pacers in the finals to secure his first ever NBA title. The image of Shaq clutching the Larry O'Brien trophy to his chest wasn't just a celebration, it was a release of 8 years of pressure. He had swept the board: All-Star MVP, regular season MVP, and Finals MVP. He was officially a god on the court. Everything seemed perfect, but beneath the surface, the rot was setting in. While Shaq spent the offseason resting, recording, and enjoying the fruits of his labor, Kobe Bryant was already back in the gym, consumed by the need to one-up Michael Jordan. By the time training camp rolled around, the contrast in their work ethics was glaring. Kobe was in the best shape of his life. Shaq was not. Kobe was livid. He viewed Shaq's relaxed approach as a betrayal of their championship potential. Despite the tension, they were still a buzzsaw. In the 2001 playoffs, they didn't just win, they annihilated the competition. They swept the Blazers, the Kings, and the Spurs, setting up a finals collision with Allen Iverson's 76ers. Shaq was unstoppable, capturing back-to-back finals MVPs. By 2002, after a miracle comeback against the Kings in the Western Conference Finals, they swept the New Jersey Nets. Three-peat, 3 rings in 3 years. But the dream of 4 was dying in a doctor's office. Before the 2003 season, Shaq made a fateful decision to delay a necessary toe surgery until the season started, famously declaring that since he got injured on company time, he would recover on company time. Kobe was done. The professional frustration transformed into toxic personal warfare. The Lakers were ripped apart by the internal fire, and when the San Antonio Spurs finally eliminated them in 2003, the Batman and Robin era was effectively over. The front office had a choice: build around the aging heavy giant or the rising obsessive assassin. They chose Kobe. Shaq, the most dominant force the game had ever seen, was traded to Miami. He was angry, he was hurt, and he had one final mission: to prove to the world that he didn't need Kobe Bryant or Phil Jackson to sit on the throne. Shaq arrived in South Beach with a chip on his shoulder the size of a boulder. He looked at the young, electric Dwayne Wade and made a promise. "I'm gonna bring a championship to Miami." He wasn't just talking. This time, he was all in. Pat Riley, the Miami Heat president, demanded total submission. He set a strict body fat limit of 10%, and for the first time in his career, Shaq complied. He had learned his lessons in LA. This time, he didn't need to be Batman. He was content being D. Wade's Robin. The Heat were a wrecking crew, but in the 2006 finals against the Dallas Mavericks, they hit a wall. Down 0-2, the Mavericks were so confident they had already mapped out their championship parade route. But Pat Riley caught wind of the arrogance. He walked into the locker room, threw the newspaper article on the table, and the switch flipped. In a heartbeat, the series changed. Dwayne Wade put on an absolute masterclass, and Shaq provided the immovable anchor in the paint. They ripped off 4 straight wins. When the buzzer sounded, the confetti fell, and Shaq had done it. He had proved to the world and to himself that he didn't need Phil Jackson, he didn't need the Lakers, and he didn't need Kobe Bryant to sit on the throne. His journey eventually wound down through Phoenix, Cleveland, and Boston. He was getting older, slower, and the explosive athleticism was fading. When he finally walked away, the resume was undeniable. 4 championships, 3 finals MVPs, a top 10 all-time scorer. But the story didn't end when he hung up his massive size 22 sneakers. No one could have anticipated what came next. Instead of fading into the background or going broke like so many retired athletes, Shaq took the exact same ruthless dominance he used to break backboards and applied it to the boardroom. He transformed into a brilliant, visionary entrepreneur. While other players were buying sports cars, Shaq was buying businesses. He bought 155 Five Guys restaurants. He bought 150 car washes. He invested early in a little startup called Google. He had successfully monetized his magnetic personality, proving he was just as unstoppable in a suit as he was in a jersey. He took a seat at the desk of TNT's Inside the NBA, turning his hilarious, unfiltered banter with Charles Barkley into the gold standard of sports television. But perhaps the most profound part of his legacy is what happened when the cameras were off. Beneath the intimidating 300-pound exterior, he was a giant with a fiercely protective heart. He would quietly walk into a Walmart, see a struggling family trying to pay for layaway, and just buy the entire store's inventory of bicycles for the neighborhood kids. He paid for strangers' funerals. He bought countless laptops for underprivileged students. No press releases, no media stunts, just the little warrior from Newark, remembering exactly what it felt like to have nothing. And yet, despite the platinum albums, the blockbuster movies, the billion-dollar boardroom deals, and his massive philanthropy, he will always be remembered by basketball traditionalists as the man who missed 5,000 free throws. People will argue forever. Was he lazy? Was he better than Wilt? Was he the most dominant player to ever lace up? But look deeper. The kid who was too big, too awkward, and too broken to fit in didn't just survive his environment, he conquered it. He turned his biggest weakness into a badge of honor, his deep-seated insecurity into the fuel that burned the NBA to the ground, and his giant heart into an empire that outlasted his playing days. Shaquille O'Neal wasn't just a player. He was a force of nature who taught us that even the most fractured pieces can be used to build a monument that lasts forever. If you enjoyed this untold story from the hardwood, make sure to drop a like and subscribe to In the Paint.